I still check the back seat every single time I get in my car now, even in broad daylight. This was 3 winters ago when I was working the overnight shift at a 24-hour diner off Route 9. I was 22, living paycheck to paycheck, and the graveyard shift paid an extra $2 an hour. Most nights were quiet. Truckers, insomniacs, the occasional drunk couple. I didn't mind it. The tips were decent, and my manager let me do homework between orders. That night started normal. We'd gotten snow earlier in the week, and the parking lot was still patchy with gray slush and salt stains. I clocked in at 11 p.m., and by midnight the place was dead. One guy sat at the counter nursing coffee and working on a laptop, a family with 2 sleeping kids in a booth. That was it. Around 1:30 a.m., a woman came in alone, mid-30s maybe. She had long dark hair pulled into a ponytail and wore a puffy winter coat that looked expensive. She sat at a booth near the window and ordered just coffee. Nothing unusual about that. People came in all the time to kill an hour or warm up. What struck me was how she kept looking at the parking lot, not casually, like someone waiting for a ride. She'd stare out the window for a long time, then glance at her phone, then back to the window. Her hands were shaking when I brought her coffee. "You okay?" I asked. She looked up at me quickly, like she'd forgotten I was there. "Yeah, fine." I left it alone. About 20 minutes later, she got up and walked to the restroom. She was in there for a while, long enough that I started to wonder if something was wrong. When she came back, she looked pale. She sat back down and didn't touch her coffee. The guy at the counter left around 2 a.m. The family left shortly after. That left just me, the cook in the back, and the woman by the window. She kept checking her phone. Every few minutes, she'd pick it up, look at the screen, and put it back down. She never typed anything, never made a call, just checked it. Around 2:30 a.m., she waved me over. "Can I ask you something?" she said quietly. "Sure." "If I gave you $20, would you walk me to my car?" I hesitated. It wasn't a weird request exactly. The parking lot was dark and empty, but something about the way she asked made my skin prickle. "Is someone bothering you?" I said. She looked at me for a long moment, then she shook her head. "No, I don't want to walk out there alone." I told her I'd ask my manager. He was in the back doing inventory and barely looked up when I explained. "Yeah, sure, just make it quick." When I came back to tell her, she was already standing with her coat on. She handed me a 20. I tried to wave it off, but she pressed it into my hand. "Please," she said. We walked out together. The cold hit immediately. My breath clouded in front of me, and the wind cut through my uniform. She led me to a silver sedan parked near the back of the lot, away from the lights. That struck me as odd. Why park so far away? She unlocked the car with her key fob, and the lights blinked. She opened the driver's door and stood there for a second, not getting in. "Thank you," she said. I nodded and started to turn back toward the diner. That's when I heard her gasp. I spun around. She was frozen, staring into her car. I stepped closer and looked inside. There was a man in her back seat. He was sitting upright, perfectly still, staring straight ahead. He didn't look at us, didn't move, just sat there with his hands folded in his lap like he was waiting for a ride. The woman backed away from the car, her hand over her mouth. I grabbed her arm and pulled her toward the diner. She didn't resist. We both just moved. Inside, I locked the door and told her to call the police. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone. She didn't call anyone. She just stood there staring out the window at her car. "How long were you in the diner?" I asked. "An hour," she whispered. An hour. He'd been sitting in her back seat the entire time. The police came about 15 minutes later, 2 officers. They approached the car with flashlights, and one of them opened the back door. The man stepped out calmly, didn't run, didn't resist. They cuffed him and put him in the cruiser. One of the officers came inside to talk to us. He said the man had a knife. He'd been waiting. The woman left in her car after they cleared it. I watched her taillights disappear down the highway and wondered how long she'd known, how long she'd felt it. I finished my shift, but I didn't stop shaking until I got home. The part that bothers me most is this. I asked the officer if the guy said anything, why he was in her car, what he was planning to do. The officer looked uncomfortable. He said the man smiled when they pulled him out, and the only thing he said was, "She knew I was there." The first time I saw the hiker, I thought he was lost. This happened last fall during a solo camping trip in the White Mountains. I'd been planning it for months, just me, a tent, and 3 days of trails. I'm an experienced hiker, done dozens of trips, and I prefer going alone. It's meditative, no small talk, no waiting for anyone, just you and the woods. I started the trail early on a Friday morning. The weather was perfect, clear skies, cool air, leaves just starting to turn. I passed a few people on the way up, exchanged the usual nods and hellos, and by afternoon, I was deep enough in that I didn't see anyone else. I set up camp near a clearing about a mile off the main trail. There was a stream nearby and the ground was level. I pitched my tent, filtered some water, and made dinner as the sun went down. It was peaceful, the kind of quiet that makes you forget the rest of the world exists. Around 9 p.m., I was sitting by my fire reading when I heard footsteps. Not animal footsteps, human ones, deliberate and steady. A man stepped into the edge of my firelight. He was maybe in his 40s, wearing a dirty flannel jacket and cargo pants. He had a backpack, but it looked old and deflated, like it wasn't carrying much. His boots were caked in mud. "Hey," he said. "Hey," I replied. I kept my book open, trying to seem relaxed. He stood there for a moment, just outside the fire's reach. "You camp here often?" "First time at this spot," I said. He nodded slowly. "Good spot. Private." There was something off about the way he said it. Not threatening exactly, but too familiar, like he'd been watching me set up. "You heading out soon?" I asked, hoping he'd take the hint. "Nah," he said. "I'm camped close by." He didn't elaborate, didn't point in any direction, just stood there. After an uncomfortable silence, he said, "Well, have a good night," and walked back into the darkness. I waited until I couldn't hear his footsteps anymore. Then I put out the fire and went into my tent. I locked the zippers from the inside, which is something I rarely do. I told myself I was being paranoid, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I didn't sleep well. Every sound outside made me tense. The wind, branches cracking, the stream. Around 2 a.m., I heard footsteps again. They circled my tent, slow, deliberate steps that stopped every few seconds. I held my breath, listening. My knife was in my backpack, just out of reach. The footsteps stopped directly outside the tent door. I could see a shadow through the fabric, a shape standing there, not moving. I didn't make a sound. I just waited. After what felt like an hour, but was probably only a minute, the footsteps moved away. In the morning, I packed up as quickly as I could. I didn't make breakfast, didn't boil water. I just stuffed everything into my bag and started hiking. About half a mile down the trail, I saw him again. He was sitting on a rock off to the side, eating something from a plastic bag. When he saw me, he smiled. "Morning," he said. I nodded and kept walking. He didn't follow me, but I felt his eyes on my back until I rounded a bend. I hiked fast, pushing myself harder than I normally would. I wanted to get back to the main trail where there would be other people. I made it to a popular overlook around noon. There were a dozen people there taking pictures and having lunch. I felt instantly safer. I sat down on a bench and drank some water, trying to calm down. That's when I saw him again. He was standing at the far end of the overlook, partially hidden behind a tree. He wasn't looking at the view. He was looking at me. I stood up and walked toward a family with 2 kids, pretending to admire the scenery near them. When I glanced back, he was gone. I hiked the rest of the way down without stopping. I didn't see him again, but I felt him. Every time the trail curved or passed through thick trees, I expected to see him waiting. I made it to my car just before dark. I threw my gear in the trunk and got in, locking the doors immediately. I sat there for a moment, hands on the wheel, trying to convince myself I was safe. That's when I saw the note under my windshield wiper. I got out slowly, looking around the parking lot. It was empty. I pulled the note out. It was written in pencil on a scrap of paper. "See you next time." I drove home and never went back to that trail. A few months later, I saw a news article. A woman had gone missing in the White Mountains. They found her campsite, but she was never seen again. The article included a description of a man they wanted to question. When I saw the sketch, my stomach dropped. It was him. My daughter stopped sleeping through the night when she was 4 years old. It started suddenly. One week she was fine, the next she was waking up screaming. My wife and I would take turns going into her room, calming her down, checking for monsters under the bed like parents do. She'd eventually fall back asleep, and we'd stumble back to our room exhausted. This went on for 2 weeks, every night. Sometime between 2 and 3 a.m., she'd start crying. When we asked what was wrong, she'd say the same thing. "The man is looking at me." Kids have nightmares, we knew that, but it was the consistency that bothered us. Same time every night, same explanation. We tried everything. Night lights, leaving the door open, new bedtime routine. Nothing helped. One night, I was the one who went in. She was sitting up in bed, pointing at her window. "He's there," she whispered. I looked. Her window faced the backyard. We lived in a quiet neighborhood with a wooden fence. There was nothing there. "There's no one there, sweetie," I said. "He's hiding," she said. I closed the curtains and stayed with her until she fell asleep. When I got back to bed, my wife asked if I'd checked outside. I hadn't. It was 2 a.m. and freezing, and I didn't want to encourage our daughter's fears by treating them as real. The next night, same thing. She woke up crying. This time, my wife went in. When she came back to bed, she looked pale. "What's wrong?" I asked. "I saw something," she said. I sat up. "What do you mean?" When I was closing the curtains, I saw something move near the fence. "An animal," I said. "Maybe." She didn't sound convinced. The following night, I stayed up. I sat in the living room with the lights off, watching our backyard through the kitchen window. I felt ridiculous, but I couldn't sleep anyway. At 2:17 a.m., I saw it. A figure stepped out from behind our shed, tall, wearing dark clothes. They moved slowly across the yard toward the house, then stopped directly below our daughter's window. I couldn't see their face. They were wearing a hood, but I could see them looking up. My heart was pounding. I grabbed my phone and called 911, whispering into it as I watched the person standing in my backyard. The dispatcher asked if they were trying to break in. I said no, they were just standing there. She said she'd send someone. I kept watching. The figure didn't move, just stood there, looking up at my daughter's window. After about 5 minutes, they walked back toward the shed and disappeared into the shadows. Police arrived 15 minutes later. They searched the yard with flashlights and found footprints in the frost near the fence. They said it looked like someone had been standing there for a while. The grass was flattened. They asked if we had cameras. We didn't. They said we should get some. After they left, my wife and I moved our daughter into our room. She slept in a sleeping bag on the floor. She didn't wake up once. The next day, I installed motion sensor lights in the backyard and ordered cameras. My wife called a locksmith to check all our windows. For 3 nights, nothing happened. Our daughter slept fine. We started to relax, thinking maybe the police presence had scared whoever it was away. On the 4th night, the motion light went off at 2 a.m. I checked the camera feed on my phone. Someone was in the yard again. Same spot, same posture, just standing there. I called the police again. This time, they got there faster. I watched on my phone as the officers approached the figure. They shouted something. The person turned and ran. The officers chased them to the back fence. The person climbed over and disappeared. They never caught them. We found something the next morning when we went outside. On the ground below our daughter's window, someone had placed a small stuffed rabbit. It was old and dirty, like it had been buried. My daughter had never seen it before. Neither had we. We moved 2 months later, didn't tell anyone where we were going, just packed up and left. Our daughter is 6 now. She sleeps fine most nights. But sometimes when I'm putting her to bed, she'll look at her window and say, "Do you think he knows where we live?" I always say no, but I bought cameras for this house too. I worked as a night custodian at a community college for 2 years before I quit. The pay was okay and the work wasn't hard. I had an entire building to myself from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., just vacuuming, emptying trash, and mopping floors. I'd listen to podcasts and let my mind wander. It was boring, but boring was fine. The building was old, built in the 1960s, 3 floors, mostly classrooms and offices. During the day, it was packed with students and faculty, but at night, it was a tomb. The lights were on timers, shutting off section by section as I finished each area. I got used to working in the dark. About 6 months into the job, I started noticing small things. A door I'd locked would be open, chairs rearranged in a classroom I'd already cleaned, trash I'd emptied would have new garbage in it. I figured it was students sneaking in after hours, or maybe another staff member had a key. I mentioned it to my supervisor once and he shrugged it off, said old buildings had quirks. Then I started hearing footsteps. It would happen on the 3rd floor, usually around 2 a.m. I'd be vacuuming or wiping down a chalkboard and I'd hear someone walking in the hallway. Steady footsteps, like someone pacing. The first time it happened, I called out, "Hello? Building's closed." The footsteps stopped. I went into the hallway. Nobody there. I checked all the classrooms and offices. Empty. This happened multiple times over several weeks, always the 3rd floor, always around 2 a.m. I started avoiding that floor until later in my shift, after 3 or 4 a.m. That seemed to help. One night, I was cleaning a classroom on the 2nd floor when I heard a door slam upstairs. Loud, deliberate, it echoed through the empty building. I stood there holding a mop, staring at the ceiling. My supervisor had told me I was alone. The building was locked. I had the only key. I went upstairs. Every door was closed. I checked each one. Nothing. I decided to finish the 3rd floor quickly and get out. I pushed my cart down the hallway, moving faster than usual. I just wanted to be done. That's when I saw him. A man standing at the far end of the hallway, near the stairs. He was just standing there, facing me. He wore dark clothes and had his hands at his sides. I stopped moving. My mouth went dry. "Building's closed," I said. My voice came out shaky. He didn't respond, didn't move. "You need to leave," I said. He tilted his head slightly, like he was studying me. I backed up slowly, keeping my eyes on him. When I reached the stairwell door, I turned and ran. I didn't stop until I reached the main entrance. I left my cart, my supplies, everything. I sat in my car with the doors locked, staring at the building. I called my supervisor. It went to voicemail. I sat there until sunrise, waiting for someone else to arrive. When the morning shift showed up, I told them what happened. They searched the building, found nothing. My supervisor asked if I was sure I saw someone. I said yes. He said the cameras didn't show anyone entering or leaving. I requested the footage. He said he'd check. He never got back to me. I quit 2 weeks later, didn't even give notice. I just stopped showing up. A few months after I left, I ran into one of the other custodians at a grocery store. I asked if anything weird ever happened to him in that building. He looked at me for a long time before answering. "3rd floor?" he said. I nodded. "I don't go up there anymore," he said. "Not after 1 a.m. "Why?" He leaned in closer. "Because that's when he shows up." "Who?" "I don't know," he said, "but he's always there." I never went back to that building, but sometimes late at night, I think about that man in the hallway. The way he stood there, perfectly still, the way he tilted his head, and I wonder if he's still there, waiting for the next person to work alone. I don't stay in motels anymore, no matter how tired I am. This happened 3 years ago when I was driving cross-country for a job interview. I'd been on the road for 8 hours and my eyes were starting to blur. It was late September, already dark by 7 p.m., and I was somewhere in rural Nebraska, where towns are 40 miles apart and gas stations close at sunset. I saw the motel sign around 9:30, the Prairie Rest Inn. It looked old but maintained, with that classic motor lodge layout where all the rooms face the parking lot. Only 2 other cars were there when I pulled in. The woman at the front desk was in her 60s, pleasant enough. She asked if I needed 1 night or 2, and I said 1. She handed me a key attached to a heavy plastic tag with the room number stamped on it, room 8. "Breakfast starts at 6, she said. "Continental, nothing fancy." I thanked her and drove my car around to park in front of my room. The door stuck when I tried to open it, like the frame had swollen from humidity. I had to put my shoulder into it. The room was exactly what I expected. 2 double beds with floral bedspreads, a TV bolted to the dresser, a window with heavy curtains, and a bathroom with a shower tub combo. It smelled like cleaning chemicals and something underneath that, something musty and old. I dropped my bag on the bed closest to the door and went to take a shower. The water pressure was terrible and the temperature couldn't decide between scalding and freezing, but I made it work. When I came out, I noticed the bathroom mirror had fogged completely, except for one spot. A handprint, small, like a child's hand. I stared at it for a second, then wiped the whole mirror down with my towel and told myself it was from whoever cleaned the room last. I got dressed and settled into bed with my phone. No signal. The Wi-Fi password the woman gave me didn't work. I gave up and turned on the TV instead. Late-night reruns of shows I'd never heard of. I fell asleep with the TV on, which is something I do in unfamiliar places. The noise makes me feel less alone. I woke up suddenly in complete darkness. The TV was off, so was the lamp on the nightstand. I reached for my phone, dead. I knew I'd plugged it in. I could feel the charger cord still connected, but the screen wouldn't light up. That's when I heard it, a wet, dragging sound coming from the bathroom. I sat up slowly, trying to see in the dark. My eyes hadn't adjusted yet. Everything was just shapes and shadows. The dragging sound continued, slow, deliberate, like something heavy being pulled across tile. I stayed completely still, barely breathing. My hand moved to the lamp on the nightstand. I fumbled for the switch and pressed it. Nothing happened. I tried again. Still nothing. The dragging sound stopped. I heard water dripping, then a soft creak like weight shifting on old floorboards. Something was moving in the bathroom. I couldn't see it, but I could hear it. Footsteps, small padding footsteps. They moved from the bathroom into the main room, slowly, closer. My chest felt tight. I wanted to get up and run, but I couldn't make myself move. I just sat there in the dark, listening to those footsteps come closer. They stopped at the foot of my bed. I couldn't see anything. The darkness was total, but I could feel it. Something standing there, watching me. The silence stretched out so long, I started to wonder if I'd imagined it. Then I heard breathing. Shallow and wet, like someone with a chest cold. "Are you awake?" The voice was small, a child's voice. I didn't answer. I couldn't. "I know you're awake," it said. "I can see you." My whole body went cold. I wanted to scream, to turn on the light, to do anything, but I just sat there frozen. "Why did you take my bed?" I didn't understand. I hadn't taken anything. The breathing got closer. I could feel it now, cold air on my face. It was leaning over me. "This is my room," it whispered. "You need to leave." I finally found my voice. I'm leaving. I'm leaving right now." "Good." The presence pulled back. I heard the footsteps retreat toward the bathroom. Then the door closed softly. I didn't wait. I grabbed my bag, didn't bother with shoes, and ran. I didn't care that my phone was dead or that I was wearing pajamas. I just ran. I made it to my car and locked the doors. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely get the key in the ignition. When I looked back at the room, the lights were on inside. I could see movement through the window. Someone small, standing there, watching me. I drove until I hit the next town and pulled into a 24-hour diner parking lot. I sat there until sunrise, too afraid to close my eyes. In the morning, I called the motel to tell them I'd left the key in the room. The woman who answered wasn't the same one from the night before. "Room 8?" she said when I told her which room I'd stayed in. "We don't rent that room anymore." "What do you mean? I stayed there last night." There was a pause. "No one stayed in room 8 for 3 years." I told her she was wrong. I'd checked in. I paid. I had the receipt. She asked me to describe the woman who checked me in. When I did, she went quiet. That was my mother. She died 2 years ago. I hung up. I never went back for my phone charger, and I checked my bank statement later that day. No charge from the Prairie Rest Inn. Nothing at all. My uncle owned a bed and breakfast in Vermont that he ran by himself after my aunt passed away. I visited him one weekend in early November to help with some repairs before winter set in. The place was beautiful, an old colonial house with 6 guest rooms, wide porches, and views of the mountains. But it was remote. The nearest neighbor was 3 miles down a dirt road. I arrived Friday afternoon and spent the evening helping him fix a broken gutter and patch some holes in the roof. We had dinner together, watched some TV, and I went to bed around 10 p.m. in one of the guest rooms on the 2nd floor. My uncle slept on the 3rd floor in what used to be the attic. He'd converted it into a master bedroom years ago. The 2nd floor had the 6 guest rooms, but only 2 were occupied that weekend. A couple in their 50s in room 3 and a businessman in room 5. I was in room 1 at the end of the hallway. I fell asleep easily. The bed was comfortable and the house was quiet, except for the wind in the trees outside. I woke up around 2 a.m. to the sound of someone walking in the hallway. At first, I thought it was one of the guests going to the bathroom or getting water, but the footsteps didn't stop. They went back and forth, slowly, deliberately, pacing. I lay there listening. After about 5 minutes, the footsteps stopped outside my door. I heard the doorknob turn. My door was locked. I'd made sure of it before going to bed, but the knob kept turning, slowly, testing it. "Hello?" I called out. The turning stopped. Then I heard footsteps walk away down the hall. I got up and cracked my door open. The hallway was empty. All the other doors were closed. I went back to bed, telling myself it was one of the guests sleepwalking or confused. Old houses make weird sounds. People wander at night. The next morning at breakfast, I mentioned it to my uncle. He frowned. "What room did you say you were in?" "Room 1. He set down his coffee. "That's strange." "Why?" "Room 1's door doesn't lock properly from the outside. The mechanism's broken, has been for months." I felt my stomach drop. "But someone tried the handle last night, multiple times." He looked at me for a long moment. "Did you check the hallway?" "Yeah, no one was there." He nodded slowly. "The couple in room 3 checked out early this morning, said they heard someone walking around all night. The businessman in room 5 is still here, but I saw him at 6 a.m. for an early breakfast. He didn't mention anything." We dropped it, but something about his expression bothered me, like he wasn't surprised. That night, I locked my door again, even though my uncle said the lock worked fine from the inside. I also pushed a chair against it. I woke up at 2:14 a.m. The footsteps were back, same slow, deliberate pacing in the hallway. I stayed in bed listening. This time, they sounded heavier, more purposeful. They stopped outside my door again. The knob turned, the door rattled against the chair. Then, I heard breathing, heavy, labored, right outside. "I know you're in there." The voice was male, deep, unfamiliar. My heart was pounding. I didn't answer. "Open the door." I grabbed my phone and called my uncle. It rang 6 times before he picked up. "Someone's outside my door," I whispered. "What?" "Someone's trying to get in. They're talking to me." I heard him get out of bed. "I'm coming down." I stayed on the line, listening to his footsteps on the stairs. They were coming from above me, from the 3rd floor. But the breathing outside my door didn't stop. "I'm in the hallway," my uncle said. "I don't see anyone." "They're right outside my door." "I'm looking at your door right now. There's no one here." The breathing stopped. I waited a few seconds, then moved the chair and opened the door. My uncle was standing in the hallway in his robe, looking confused and worried. The hallway was empty. "I heard them," I said. "They were right here." He nodded. "I believe you." We went downstairs and he made tea. He didn't say anything for a while, just sat there staring at his cup. "This happened before," he finally said, "when your aunt was alive. Guests would complain about footsteps and voices, doors opening on their own. We tried to ignore it, but after she died, it got worse." "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I didn't want to scare you, and I thought maybe it would stop." I left the next morning, told him I had to get back early for work. He understood. 3 months later, my uncle sold the bed and breakfast. He never told me why, but I didn't ask. Some places just aren't meant to have guests. I worked the night shift at a highway motel for 6 months before I quit without notice. The place was a dump. Peeling paint, stained carpets, and a parking lot full of potholes. But it was right off Interstate 80, and we got enough business to stay open. Truckers mostly. Occasionally a family or couple passing through. I worked alone from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., checking people in, handling complaints, and making sure no one trashed the rooms. The owner lived 20 minutes away and never came by during my shift unless something was broken. Most nights were boring. I'd sit behind the desk, watching old movies or reading. Around 3 or 4 a.m., I'd do a walk around the property to check for anything weird. Broken lights, unlocked doors, people smoking in non-smoking rooms. One night in February, a man checked in around midnight. He was in his 30s, tall, wearing a dark coat and jeans. He had a duffel bag slung over one shoulder. He didn't make eye contact when he asked for a room. "How many nights?" I asked. "Just one." I slid the registration form across the counter. He filled it out quickly. His handwriting was messy but legible. Michael Torres, Ohio license plate. "Room 12, I said, handing him the key. He took it without a word and walked out. I watched him through the window. He got into a blue sedan parked near the end of the lot and drove it around to room 12. He didn't take his bag with him when he went inside. That struck me as odd. Most people bring their stuff in right away, but I didn't think much of it. Around 2 a.m., I did my usual walkthrough. Everything was quiet. Room 12 had the curtains drawn and the lights off. His car was still parked outside. At 3:30 a.m., I saw him again. He was standing in the parking lot, just outside the lobby window, staring at me. I jumped. I hadn't heard him walk up. He just appeared. I waved awkwardly. He didn't wave back, just kept staring. After a few seconds, he turned and walked back toward his room. I felt uneasy but tried to shake it off. People are weird. Insomnia makes them weirder. At 4 a.m., my phone rang. The desk phone, not my cell. I picked up. "Front desk?" Silence. "Hello?" I could hear breathing, faint, steady. "This is the front desk. Can I help you?" The line went dead. I checked the caller ID, room 12. I hung up and stared at the phone, waiting for it to ring again. It didn't. At 4:30 a.m., I decided to check on him. If something was wrong, I needed to know. I walked across the parking lot to room 12. The lights were still off. I knocked. No answer. I knocked again. "Mr. Torres, everything okay?" I heard movement inside. Footsteps. Then the door opened a crack. He stood there in the darkness, blocking the doorway. I couldn't see his face clearly. "Did you call the front desk?" I asked. "No." The caller ID showed room 12. Wasn't me. He started to close the door. "Wait," I said. "Is someone else in there with you?" He stopped. "No." "Are you sure? Because someone called from your room." He opened the door a little wider. I could see part of the room behind him. The bed was made, the TV was off. His duffel bag sat unopened on the floor. "I've been asleep," he said. I didn't believe him, but I didn't know what else to say. "Okay, sorry to bother you." He closed the door. I walked back to the lobby, feeling watched the entire way. At 5 a.m., I heard a car start. I looked out the window. The blue sedan was pulling out of the parking lot. Room 12's door was wide open. I grabbed the master key and went over. The room was empty. Bed still made, duffel bag gone. But the bathroom light was on. I stepped inside carefully. The bathroom was small. Sink, toilet, shower with a plastic curtain. The shower curtain was drawn. I pulled it back. Nothing. But the bathtub was wet, recently used, and there was something written on the mirror in condensation. 2 words: "Thank you." I backed out of the room and locked the door. When my shift ended at 7 a.m., I told the morning manager what happened. She checked the registration. Michael Torres had paid in cash. The address he wrote was fake. The license plate didn't match any vehicle in the system. We pulled the security footage. The cameras showed him checking in, showed him walking to his room, but they never showed him leaving. The car pulled out of the lot on its own. I quit the next day. Sometimes I still think about those 2 words on the mirror. Thank you. Thank you for what? I never went back to find out. I was 9 years old when I got scarlet fever and had to stay home from school for 2 weeks. This was back in 2015, and we were living in my great-aunt's old farmhouse while our actual house was being renovated. The farmhouse was huge and drafty, with creaking floors and windows that rattled when the wind picked up. My mom set me up in a small bedroom on the 2nd floor because it was closest to the bathroom, and she could check on me easily. The fever made everything feel strange. Colors seemed brighter, sounds were muffled and distant. I'd drift in and out of sleep at random times, never quite sure if I was awake or dreaming. One afternoon, I woke up from a nap feeling disoriented. The room was dim. Gray light filtered through the thin curtains. My mouth was dry and my head felt heavy, like it was full of cotton. I turned over in bed, and that's when I saw her. A little girl was standing in the corner of the room near the closet. She looked about my age, maybe younger. She wore a white nightgown that was too long for her, dragging on the floor. Her hair was dark and hung in front of her face. She wasn't moving, just standing there. I blinked hard, thinking the fever was making me see things, but when I opened my eyes, she was still there. "Hello?" I said. My voice came out as a whisper. She didn't respond. I sat up slowly. My heart was starting to beat faster. "Are you lost?" Nothing. I looked toward the door. It was closed. I didn't remember closing it. When I looked back, the girl had moved. She was closer now, standing at the foot of my bed. I hadn't seen her walk. She'd just appeared there. "Who are you?" I asked. She tilted her head to the side, slowly, too far. Her neck bent at an angle that didn't look right. That's when I started to feel really scared. I called out for my mom, my voice cracked. "Mom!" The girl raised one hand and pointed at me. Her finger was thin and pale. "Mom!" I screamed louder this time. I heard footsteps running up the stairs. The door opened and my mom rushed in. "What's wrong? What happened?" I pointed at the foot of the bed. "There's a girl, right there!" My mom looked where I was pointing. Her face went from concerned to confused. "Honey, there's no one here." "She's right there," I insisted, "in the white dress." My mom walked to the foot of the bed and waved her hand through the empty air. "See? Nothing." But I could still see her. The girl was standing right where my mom's hand had passed through, staring at me with her head still tilted. My mom sat on the edge of the bed and felt my forehead. "You're burning up. The fever's making you see things that aren't real." She gave me more medicine and stayed with me until I fell asleep. When I woke up, it was dark outside. My mom had left a small lamp on by the bed. The room felt colder than before. The girl was back. This time, she was sitting in the rocking chair by the window. The chair was moving slowly, creaking with each rock. I pulled the blanket up to my chin and watched her. I was too afraid to call out again. My mom wouldn't believe me anyway. The girl's head turned toward me. For the first time, I could see her face clearly. Her eyes were completely black. No whites, no pupils, just solid black. She smiled. Her teeth were gray and broken. I wanted to scream, but nothing came out. I just lay there frozen, staring at her. She stood up from the chair and walked toward my bed. Each step was slow and deliberate. The floorboards didn't creak under her feet. She reached the side of my bed and leaned down close to my face. I could smell something rotten, like meat left out in the sun. "You can see me," she whispered. Her voice sounded wrong, like two voices speaking at once. I nodded, too terrified to do anything else. "Good," she said. "Then you can play with me." She reached out and touched my hand. Her fingers were ice cold. I yanked my hand back and rolled out of bed on the other side. I ran to the door and threw it open, bolting down the hallway to my parents' room. My dad was half asleep when I burst in. "What's going on?" "There's a girl in my room," I sobbed. "She touched me." My parents exchanged looks. My dad got up and walked with me back to my room. He turned on all the lights. The room was empty. The rocking chair was still. The closet door was closed. "See?" he said gently. "Nothing here. It's just the fever." But when I looked at my hand, the one she'd touched, there was a mark. A small handprint, pale white against my skin, ice cold to the touch. My dad saw it too. His expression changed. "How did you get this?" he asked quietly. "She touched me," I said. My parents didn't let me sleep in that room again. They moved me downstairs to the living room couch. My dad slept in the armchair next to me every night until my fever broke. We never talked about what happened, but years later, I asked my great aunt about the farmhouse, if anyone had died there. She got quiet for a long time. Then she told me. A little girl had lived in the house back in the 1950s. She'd gotten sick with scarlet fever. She died in the upstairs bedroom, the same room where I'd been staying. Last summer, I rented a cabin in the mountains for a week to finish writing my thesis. I needed complete isolation. No roommates, no distractions, just me and my laptop. I found the place on a rental website. It was cheap, remote, and available immediately. Perfect. The drive took 3 hours on winding mountain roads. The cabin sat at the end of a dirt path surrounded by dense pine forest. No other buildings in sight. No cell service. The owner had left the key under the mat with a note. "Enjoy your stay. Firewood out back. Nearest town is 40 minutes south if you need anything." Inside, the cabin was small but clean. One main room with a kitchenette, a bedroom, and a bathroom. Large windows looked out into the trees. I unpacked, made dinner, and settled into work. The first 2 days were productive. I wrote more than I had in weeks. The silence was exactly what I needed. On the third night, something changed. I was working late, around 11 p.m., when I heard a car engine. I looked out the window but couldn't see any headlights. The sound got closer, then stopped. I waited, listening. Nothing. I went back to my laptop, figuring someone had gotten lost and turned around. 20 minutes later, I heard footsteps on the porch. Heavy boots, slow and deliberate. I froze. My heart started pounding. The footsteps circled the cabin, around the front, along the side, to the back. Then they stopped near the kitchen window. I crept over and peeked through the curtain. I couldn't see anyone. It was too dark. Then a face appeared on the other side of the glass. A man's face pressed close to the window, staring directly at me. I jumped back and screamed. He didn't move, just stood there, watching. I grabbed my phone. No signal. I looked for the landline the owner had mentioned. It was dead. The cord had been cut. I ran to the bedroom and locked the door. My laptop was still in the main room, but I didn't care. I just needed to get away from the windows. I heard glass breaking in the kitchen. He was coming inside. I looked around frantically. The bedroom had one small window. I opened it and climbed out, dropping onto the dirt below. I ran into the woods without looking back. The forest was pitch black. I couldn't see more than a few feet ahead. Branches scratched my face and arms. I kept running, stumbling over roots and rocks. Behind me, I heard him crashing through the trees. He was following. I ducked behind a large boulder and tried to catch my breath. My lungs burned. My legs were shaking. I listened. The forest had gone quiet. No footsteps, no movement. I waited there for what felt like hours, too terrified to move. Eventually, I saw flashlight beams in the distance, voices calling out. "Hello? Anyone out here?" I recognized the voice, the owner of the cabin. I stumbled toward the lights, crying with relief. "Help! Someone broke in!" The owner and 2 other men found me and helped me back to the cabin. Every light was on. The kitchen window was shattered. My laptop was gone. The police came the next morning. They searched the area but found no one. No footprints, no tire tracks, nothing. The owner apologized profusely. He said nothing like this had ever happened before. He offered to refund my money and help me find somewhere else to stay. I left that afternoon and drove straight home. 2 weeks later, I got a package in the mail. Inside was my laptop. There was a note taped to it, written in neat handwriting. "You forgot this." I never turned it on. I was too afraid to see what might be on it. I threw it away and bought a new one. But sometimes, late at night, when I'm working alone, I think I hear footsteps outside my apartment. Heavy boots, slow and deliberate. I tell myself it's nothing, but I always check the locks twice now. And I never rent cabins anymore.